I got divorced and moved overseas. My ex-wife married her new guy right away. My son said he would be the best man. Then he looked at me and added, "He is a good, wealthy man, not like you, Dad." During the wedding, a guest said one line that made her lose it, and then she called me. I am Harrison, 72 years old, and I spent 40 years ensuring buildings in Chicago would not collapse under their own weight. I understand structural integrity better than anyone. I know that if the foundation is rotten, it does not matter how much gold paint you slap on the walls, the house will fall. I just never expected the collapse to happen to my own family. 6 months ago, I was the boring provider. Today, I am the villain who fled to Europe. But before I tell you how I ended up sipping vintage wine on a balcony in Portugal while my former life burned to the ground, I need you to understand one thing. I gave them every chance to fix the cracks. They just chose to widen them. If you have ever been replaced by someone flashier but emptier, hit the like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It helps me feel less alone in this new paradise. The breeze coming off the Atlantic Ocean in Algarve is different from the wind in Chicago. It is warmer, softer. I was sitting on my terrace watching the sun dip below the horizon, holding a glass of deep red Alentejo wine. For the first time in decades, my shoulders were not tense. The silence was perfect. Then my phone buzzed on the glass table. I looked at the screen. The name flashing there was Patricia, my ex-wife. I should have let it go to voicemail. I had not spoken to her since I boarded the plane with a one-way ticket. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I swiped accept and put the phone to my ear, not saying a word. "Harrison, save us." Her voice was a shriek so loud I had to pull the phone away. In the background, I could hear sirens. Not just one, but a chorus of them. There was shouting. Manic, confused shouting, and the sound of something shattering. "Harrison, are you there? You have to help us. Gavin is being arrested. They are taking everything. He is not who we thought he was. Tyler is on the floor, he passed out. Harrison, please tell them you still own the house. Tell them they cannot kick us out." I took a slow sip of my wine. The taste was oaky and rich. I looked out at the ocean, watching a fishing boat bobbing on the waves. "Patricia," I said, my voice steady and low. "Do you remember what I told you 6 months ago about the foundation? I told you that you cannot build a future on a sinkhole. Harrison, this is not the time for your engineering lectures. We are being ruined." I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the table. To understand why I did that, why I left the mother of my child screaming into the void, you have to go back to the night my life actually ended. It was a Tuesday in Chicago, November, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. I had just come back from my annual physical. The doctor had told me my blood pressure was creeping up, and I needed to reduce stress. I drove home thinking about how to tell Patricia. I parked my 10-year-old Ford truck in the driveway. It was a reliable vehicle. I liked things that lasted. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of roast chicken was in the air, but the table was not set for dinner. It was cleared completely, except for a thick manila envelope sitting in the center. Patricia was standing by the window, looking out at the dark yard. She was 60, but she fought every year of it with expensive creams and treatments I never questioned. She turned around, and I saw a look in her eyes I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was contempt. "We need to talk, Harrison," she said. I put my keys on the counter. "Is everything okay? Is it Tyler?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Tyler is fine. Tyler is better than fine. This is about us. Or rather, it is about me finally waking up." She slid the envelope toward me. "I want a divorce." I stood there, still wearing my heavy coat. The words did not make sense. We had been married for 35 years. We had paid off the mortgage. We had raised a son. We were supposed to be entering our golden years. Why, I asked. Just one word. Because I am suffocating Harrison. She walked over to the table and tapped her manicured nails on the envelope. Look at you. You are 72 years old, and you act like you are 90. You count every penny. You drive that embarrassing truck. You wear the same coats you bought 10 years ago. I am bored. I have been bored for 20 years. I felt a tightness in my chest. That is called being responsible, Patricia. That is how we paid for this house. That is how we sent Tyler to private school. Responsible is just another word for cheap, she spat back. I met someone who knows how to treat a woman. His name is Gavin. I froze. Gavin. I knew the name. Gavin Vance. He was a local real estate developer, or at least that is what he called himself. Flashy billboards, leased luxury cars, the kind of man who talked loud in restaurants and tipped poorly. Gavin Vance, I repeated. The guy who wears suits that are too tight and smells like cheap cologne. Gavin just put a down payment on a Porsche Macan for me, she said, her eyes lighting up with a greed I had ignored for too long. A Porsche Harrison. When was the last time you bought me anything that did not have a practical use? He is 55. He has energy. He has big plans. He makes me feel alive. You just make me feel old. I pulled out a chair and sat down. My legs felt weak, so this is it. 35 years thrown away for a car and a midlife crisis. It is not a crisis, she snapped. It is an upgrade. Sign the papers, Harrison. I am not asking. I am taking the house. The house. I looked around the kitchen. I had designed the extension myself. I had laid the hardwood floors with my own hands on weekends. I knew every wire, every pipe, every beam in this place. You want the house? I asked quietly. Patricia, this house is old. The slate roof needs maintenance this spring that will cost $80,000. The heating system is custom complex. You cannot just run this place without knowing how it works. Gavin will handle it. She waved her hand dismissively. Gavin has people for that. He is going to renovate anyway. He says this place looks like a museum for boring people. The front door opened. I looked up, expecting to see my son, expecting an ally. Tyler walked in, shaking snow off his jacket. He was 28 years old, but he still had the softness of a boy who had never really worked for anything. I had paid for his college. I had bailed him out of 3 failed business ventures. Tyler, I said, your mother has lost her mind. She wants a divorce. She is seeing Gavin Vance. Tyler did not look surprised. He did not look upset. He walked over to his mother and stood next to her, crossing his arms. I know, Dad. I met Gavin last week. You met him, yeah. He is actually a really cool guy. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My own son, Tyler, this man is destroying our family. Dad, stop being dramatic, Tyler said, rolling his eyes. Look, nobody is happy here. You are always lecturing me about saving money and working hard. It is exhausting. Gavin gets it. He understands vision. Vision, I asked. Yeah, vision. I told him about my idea for the luxury organic dog food delivery app. You said it was saturated and risky. You told me to get a job at the engineering firm. Because it is a saturated market, Tyler, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, Gavin thinks it is genius, Tyler interrupted. He promised to invest $200,000 as seed money once the wedding is official. He is going to be an angel investor. I looked from my wife to my son. It was not just a betrayal of affection. It was a transaction. Patricia was selling the marriage for a Porsche, and Tyler was selling his loyalty for a startup check. He is buying you, Tyler, I said. You do realize that, right? He is buying your approval. He is supporting my dreams, Dad, which is more than you ever did. You have the money. I know you do. You just sit on it. You hoard it. You are selfish. Selfish. I thought about the overtime shifts I worked when Tyler was a baby so Patricia could stay home. I thought about the trust fund I had been quietly building for 20 years, compounding interest, so my grandchildren would never have to worry. I thought about the liquid assets I had moved into offshore accounts the moment I sensed Patricia pulling away months ago just in case. They thought I was a simple retiree with a pension and a paid-off house. They had no idea about the consulting fees I had commanded for major bridge projects, or the stock portfolio I managed myself. Fine, I said. I reached for the pen in my pocket. It was a nice pen. Heavy, reliable. I will sign. Patricia let out a breath she had been holding. Good. Make it easy and we will not fight you on your personal belongings. You can take your truck and your tools. We want the house and half of the checking account. I opened the envelope. I scanned the legal jargon. It was aggressive. She wanted the property fully transferred to her name within 30 days. I signed my name. Harrison Caldwell. The signature was firm. There is one thing I said, capping the pen. The house. It is legally held in a family trust. I am the trustee. I will sign the resignation of trustee rights over to you, Patricia. That gives you full control, but you need to read the trust bylaws carefully. Just sign it. Harrison. Stop stalling, she said, snatching the papers away. I do not need your advice on how to own a home. Tyler patted me on the shoulder, but it felt condescending. No hard feelings, Dad. You will be happier in a condo somewhere. Less maintenance, right? I stood up. I buttoned my coat. You are right, Tyler. Less maintenance. I walked to the door. I did not look back at the kitchen I had built. I did not look back at the wife I had adored or the son I had protected. I walked out into the cold Chicago night. The wind bit at my face, but for the first time in a long time, I did not feel the chill. I felt the heat of a bridge burning behind me. I got into my truck and started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked at the house one last time. I saw Gavin Vance pull up in a shiny silver car. I saw him walk into my house, and I saw my wife and son greet him with hugs. They were celebrating. They thought they had won the lottery. They did not know that the house they just fought so hard to steal was a ticking time bomb. And they definitely did not know that by signing those papers, I had just triggered the countdown. I drove toward the airport. I had a flight to catch, and I had a new life to start. But I knew the phone call would come eventually. I just did not think it would be this soon. Back on the balcony in Portugal, the sun had completely set. The air was cooling down. I poured myself another glass of wine. My phone screen was dark now. I wondered if they had found the clause in the trust yet. The one about moral turpitude and criminal association. Probably not. They never read the fine print. But they were about to learn that in construction and in life, the devil is always in the details. 3 days later, I was standing in the driveway scraping ice off my windshield when a silver Bentley Continental pulled up. It glided over the cracked pavement of the driveway I had been meaning to fix next summer. The window rolled down and I smelled that cloying cologne before I even saw his face. Gavin Vance stepped out. He was wearing a camel haircoat that looked expensive from a distance, but up close the stitching was uneven. He adjusted his cuffs, making sure to flash the heavy gold watch on his left wrist. Harrison, he said, his voice booming, as if we were old friends meeting at a country club. Patricia told me you were being difficult about the move-out date. I stopped scraping. I leaned my scraper against the hood of my 10-year-old Ford F-150. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I have spent my life inspecting materials for structural flaws, and Gavin Vance was full of them. Nice truck, Harry, he said, patting the rusted fender of my Ford. It has character, but you know what they say. You are what you drive. Slow, heavy, outdated. He laughed, looking back at the house where Patricia was watching from the window. I see you are admiring the Bentley, he continued, pointing a manicured finger at his car. That is German engineering, Harry. Or is it British? I lose track of my fleet. You should try it sometime. Step into the 21st century. A man with your experience should not be driving a farm vehicle. No wonder Patricia was bored. Poverty is a mindset. Harry and you are stuck in the Depression era. I looked at the watch he was waving in my face. It was supposed to be a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a watch that costs more than my truck. But I noticed something immediately. The second hand. It was ticking. Tick, tick, tick. A real Patek has a mechanical movement. The hand sweeps smoothly around the dial. It never ticks. That is a nice timepiece, Gavin, I said, keeping my face neutral. $100,000 right there, he bragged, tapping the glass face. Custom import. I nodded. I did not tell him that I knew it was a high-quality replica, probably purchased for $300 in Chinatown. I did not tell him that the plating near the clasp was already starting to wear off, revealing cheap brass underneath. I just let him believe he was fooling me. If you say so, Gavin, I said. Just then, a black sedan pulled up behind the Bentley. It was Patricia's lawyer, a young man in a sharp suit who looked like he billed by the second. He stepped out holding a briefcase and marched up the driveway, avoiding the patches of ice. Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer said, not offering his hand. We need to finalize the vacate order. My client wants possession of the property by Friday. That gives you 72 hours. 72 hours, I repeated. I have lived here for 35 years. There are 40 years of tools in the garage alone. That is not our concern, the lawyer said, handing me a document. The judge signed the temporary order this morning. Patricia has cited emotional distress caused by your presence. She wants to begin renovations immediately. Renovations. I looked at the house. My house. It was a colonial-style build from the 1920s. I had spent decades reinforcing the joists, waterproofing the basement, and upgrading the electrical grid. It looked modest on the outside, but it was a fortress on the inside. You cannot just renovate this place like it is a condo, I said, looking at Gavin. Listen to me. The drainage system in the backyard is complex. We are at the bottom of a hill. I installed a dual sump pump system with a dedicated battery backup. It requires monthly maintenance. If you dig up the yard without understanding the hydrostatic pressure, you will flood the basement in the first heavy rain. Gavin threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, performative laugh meant for Patricia to hear inside. Listen to this guy, he shouted. Hydrostatic pressure. Harry, you are overcomplicating things. That is your problem. You think too much. I am a developer. I see potential where you see problems. He swept his arm across the horizon of my backyard. We are going to rip all of that out, he declared. That old oak tree, those ugly bushes. Gone. We are going to put in an infinity pool, heated, salt water, with a swim-up bar. We are going to turn this dreary Midwest backyard into a Miami resort. An infinity pool, I said quietly. Gavin, the soil here is clay. It expands when wet. If you put a concrete shell in that ground without proper piles, it will crack within a winter. Details, Harry, details, Gavin interrupted, waving me off. Do not worry about your little pumps. I will have my crew out here next week. We are going to gut this place. Open concept. Glass walls. Patricia deserves light. She has been living in your cave long enough. Now take your truck and go find a motel. You are depressing the property value just by standing here. I looked at the lawyer. He just shrugged, checking his phone. Fine, I said. 3 days. I spent the next 48 hours moving, but I did not move the way they expected. Patricia stayed in the guest room, refusing to speak to me while I worked. Tyler did not even come to help. He was too busy looking at blueprints for the infinity pool with Gavin. I did not pack the furniture. I left the leather sofas. I left the mahogany dining table I had restored. I left the 60-inch television. I left the expensive rugs. Let them have the things. Things can be replaced. Instead, I went to the basement. I went to the wall behind the water heater, where a loose brick concealed a small safe. This was not the main safe in the office that they knew about. This was the archive. I took out the original blueprints of the house. The real ones. The ones that showed exactly where the load-bearing walls were and where the main sewer line ran. I took the deed to the land, which was still technically held in the name of the Caldwell Family Trust. I took the hard drive that contained the server backup for the smart home system. You see, I had automated the entire house 5 years ago. The heating, the cooling, the security, the irrigation, even the pool pumps were controlled by a central server I had coded myself. I sat at my desk in the garage for the last time. I opened my laptop and logged into the house administration panel. Patricia and Gavin wanted control. I would give them control. I deleted the schedule for the sump pumps. I turned off the automatic frost protection for the pipes. I disabled the voltage regulator for the main circuit breaker. Then I opened the banking portal for the trust. 20 years ago, when I set up this trust fund to protect our assets, I included a specific clause. It was standard legal language mostly, but I had added a distinct stipulation called the Moral Preservation Clause. It stated that the beneficiary of the trust, which was now Patricia, could only maintain right of use to the primary residence if she did not cohabitate with anyone having a criminal record or significant financial liability that could endanger the asset. At the time, I wrote it to protect us from potential lawsuits if Tyler ever got into trouble. I never thought I would use it against my wife. I typed in my master password. I changed the status of the trust from active to under review. This did not evict them immediately. That would be too obvious. It simply triggered a silent audit. It meant that the legal ownership of the house was now in a gray area. If they tried to sell it, refinance it, or use it as collateral for a loan, the system would flag it immediately. But they would not know that. Not until they tried to sign a check. I packed the laptop into my bag. I took one last look at the garage. My workbench was empty. I had given my best tools to my apprentice at the firm a week ago. I would rather give them to a stranger who respected the craft than leave them for Gavin to sell for scrap. I walked out to my truck. The back was filled with boxes of books, personal files, and my clothes. That was it. 40 years of life reduced to a truck bed. Patricia was standing on the porch. She was wearing a silk robe, smoking a thin cigarette. She looked like she was posing for a magazine cover. "Leave the keys on the hood." "Harrison," she called out, not bothering to come down the steps. "And do not steal the gate opener. Gavin needs it." I placed the house keys on the hood of my truck. "The gate code is changed," I said. I reset it to the factory default. 1, 2, 3, 4. Easy enough for you to remember. She rolled her eyes. "Just go, Harrison. Go be sad somewhere else." I climbed into the cab of my truck. The engine roared to life. It was a loud, unrefined sound, but to me it sounded like freedom. I backed out of the driveway. I saw Gavin's Bentley parked on the street. I saw the for sale sign in the neighbor's yard. I saw the clouds gathering above the house, dark and heavy with snow. They wanted an infinity pool. They wanted to tear out the roots and build a glass box. I shifted into drive, into tone. "Good luck with the hydrostatic pressure," I whispered to the rearview mirror. As I drove away toward the airport, toward Europe, toward a life where I would not be mocked for being prudent, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had left them the house, but I had taken its brain and its soul, and without those, a house is just a pile of bricks waiting to fall. I just hoped I would be far enough away when the collapse finally happened. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a place where promises went to die and assets were stripped like copper wire from an abandoned building. I sat on the hard wooden bench, my hands folded calmly on the table. Patricia sat across from me next to her shark of a lawyer. She was tapping her foot impatiently, checking her phone every 30 seconds. I knew she was texting Gavin, updating him on the plunder. The judge, a tired woman who looked like she had seen too many marriages dissolve over money, adjusted her glasses and looked at the financial statements. Mrs. Caldwell is requesting 50% of the pension fund and an immediate liquidation of the joint savings account, the judge said. Patricia's lawyer leaned forward. My client needs liquidity, Your Honor. She's starting a new life and requires immediate funds to secure her housing and lifestyle. Mr. Caldwell has significant holdings in land and long-term bonds, but my client is not interested in waiting for maturity dates. She wants cash. I looked at Patricia. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the number written on the lawyer's notepad. $300,000. That was the cash value of the savings account and the portion of the pension she could access immediately. To her, it was a fortune. It was the wedding budget. It was the down payment on the pool. It was the shopping spree she had already planned in her head. I leaned over to my own lawyer, a sensible man I had known for 20 years. Give it to her, I whispered. He looked at me surprised. Harrison, are you sure? That wipes out your liquid savings. You will be leaving with almost nothing in the bank. Give her the cash, I repeated. But I keep the land rights. Specifically the mineral and subterranean rights to the property and the adjacent lot we bought 10 years ago. She gets the house structure and the surface usage, but the deed to the land itself stays in the trust under my name. My lawyer nodded and presented the offer. Patricia did not even blink. She heard the words $300,000, and her eyes glazed over with greed. She did not care about mineral rights or land deeds. To her, dirt was just dirt. She did not know that the adjacent lot had just been rezoned for commercial use. She did not know that the land the house sat on was worth 5 times the value of the house itself because of the water table access. She only saw the check. We accept, Patricia said quickly, before her lawyer could even consult her. We take the cash and he keeps his dirt. I do not want any more strings attached to him. The gavel banged. It was over. I wrote the check right there in the courtroom. My hand did not shake. I handed over $300,000. In exchange, I kept my freedom, and I kept the future value that Gavin was too arrogant to research. Patricia snatched the check from my hand. She did not say thank you. She did not say goodbye. She just turned to her lawyer and said, "Let's go shopping. I need a dress that makes Gavin cry when he sees me walking down the aisle." She walked out of that courtroom thinking she had stripped me bare. She thought she was the winner. She had no idea she had just traded a gold mine for a bag of copper pennies. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The winter wind was biting, but I had one last piece of business to attend to, one last support beam to check before I condemned the building. I called Tyler. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near the university. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth with his headphones on, typing furiously on his laptop. He looked busy, but I knew he was just playing the part of the entrepreneur. I sat down across from him. He took off his headphones with a sigh. "Make it quick, Dad," he said. "I have a meeting with Gavin's brand consultant in an hour. We are designing the logo for the dog food app." "Tyler," I said, ignoring his tone. "I just came from the court. Your mother has her money. The divorce is final," good Tyler said. "Maybe now everyone can move on." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small notebook. It contained my analysis of Gavin Vance's business history. I had spent nights digging into public records. "Son, please listen to me." I did some research. Gavin's companies are shell corporations. He has declared bankruptcy 4 times in 3 different states. The luxury cars are leased through a third-party credit agency with predatory rates. This investment he promised you, it does not exist. He is using your mother's credit to float his lifestyle. Tyler's face turned red. He slammed his laptop shut. "Stop it! Just stop it right there! You are pathetic, Dad. You really are. I am trying to protect you, I said, my voice rising slightly. If you sign any partnership papers with him, you become liable for his debts. Do not let him use your name. Protect me. Tyler laughed a bitter, ugly sound. You are not trying to protect me. You are jealous. You cannot stand that a man with real vision and charisma has stepped in to be the father figure I never had. You are a small man, Harrison. You think small. You live small. Gavin thinks big. He is a fraud, Tyler. He is a genius, Tyler shouted, causing people in the coffee shop to turn and stare. And he is generous. He treats Mom like a queen. He treats me like a partner. You treated us like employees. Do this, Tyler. Save that, Tyler. Don not spend that, Tyler. We are sick of it. He stood up, grabbing his backpack. Here is the deal, Dad. I am done with your negativity. I do not want your advice. I do not want your warnings. And I definitely do not want you around to poison the wedding. Tyler, please. No, Tyler said, pointing a finger at my face. Do not call me. Do not text me. As far as I am concerned, I am a Vance now. The only time I want to hear from you is when you are dead and reading the will, and knowing you, you probably left it all to some charity just to spite us. He turned and walked out. I watched my son, my only child, walk away from me and get into an Uber. I sat there for a long time staring at the cold coffee in front of me. That was the moment the last cable snapped. The bridge had collapsed. There was nothing left to save. I stood up and left the notebook on the table. Someone else could read about Gavin's bankruptcies. It was not my job anymore. 2 hours later, I was at O'Hare International Airport. I had one suitcase. I had my passport. And I had a one-way ticket to Faro, Portugal. I walked through the terminal feeling lighter with every step. I stopped at a kiosk to buy a bottle of water. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled to Patricia. I pressed block. I scrolled to Tyler. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, remembering the day he was born, remembering the first time I taught him to ride a bike. But then I remembered his face in the coffee shop. I remembered him telling me to wait until I was dead. I pressed block. I walked to the gate and handed my boarding pass to the attendant. Going on vacation, sir? She asked with a smile. Relocation, I said. Permanent. I walked down the jet bridge. I found my seat by the window. As the plane taxied down the runway, I looked out at the gray skyline of Chicago. Somewhere down there in that sprawling city, Patricia was buying a dress she could not afford. Somewhere down there, Tyler was designing a logo for a company that would bankrupt him. Somewhere down there, my house was humming with the automated systems I had built. But the systems needed a master. The pumps needed monitoring. The roof needed inspection. The foundation needed care. They had fired the caretaker. I leaned back in my seat as the engines roared to life. The plane lifted off, pushing me back into the cushion. Let us see how they live without the maintainer, I whispered to the glass. Let us see how long the castle stands when the king has left the building. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 6 months, I slept without dreaming of cracks in the walls. The Algarve coast has a way of healing wounds you did not even know you had. For the first time in 40 years, I was not waking up to the sound of an alarm clock or a list of demands. I was waking up to the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs and the smell of salt water mixed with blooming jasmine. I rented a villa in Lagos. It was not a glass box like the one Gavin wanted to build. It was a restored farmhouse with thick stone walls and terracotta tiles. It had history. It had soul. In Chicago, I was just the old man who drove a Ford truck and refused to buy a new suit. Here I was, Harrison, the retired engineer who knew how Roman aqueducts worked. I spent my mornings at a local cafe where the owner, Manuel, saved me the best table. We did not talk about money or stocks. We talked about the structural integrity of the old city walls. I was respected not for what I could buy, but for what I knew. That is how I met Elena. She was 65, an artist who worked with clay and bronze. I met her at a gallery opening I had wandered into. I was staring at a sculpture of a bridge she had made, admiring the tension cables she had rendered in copper. "You are looking at the load distribution," she had said, standing beside me. "Everyone else looks at the shape. You are looking at how it stands up." I turned to see a woman with silver hair tied back loosely and eyes that were sharp and kind. She wore linen clothes covered in faint smudges of charcoal. She did not look like she was trying to be young. She looked comfortable in her own skin. "It is a cantilever design," I said. "If you did not counterbalance the weight here, it would collapse." "Exactly," she smiled. "Balance is everything, in art and in life." We started having dinner together. Elena did not care that I had a trust fund or a pension. She drove a 20-year-old Fiat and lived in a small studio filled with light. When I told her about my life, about the bridges I built, she listened. When I told her about Patricia, she did not offer pity. She just poured me more wine and said some people fall in love with the scaffolding and forget about the building. For the first time in decades, I felt seen. I was not a wallet. I was a man. But even in paradise, ghosts have a way of finding you. It started with a vibration in my pocket. A notification from the smart home app on my phone. I had blocked their numbers and their emails. I had erased them from my digital life, but I had not deleted the administrative access to the house systems. I kept it as a silent alarm, a way to know if the structure itself was in danger. I looked at the screen. System alert. HVAC manual override attempt failed. Master code required. I sipped my espresso. It was mid-December in Chicago now. The temperature would be dropping below freezing. I had locked the thermostat at 60 degrees. Livable but uncomfortable. It was the temperature of a warehouse, not a luxury home. Patricia liked the house at 74 degrees. She was probably freezing in her silk robes. 10 minutes later, another alert. Security alert. Vibration sensor triggered. Master bedroom. Wall safe. I frowned. They were trying to get into the wall safe. The one behind the painting of the ship. That safe was empty. I had cleared it out days ago. But the fact that they were drilling into it meant they were desperate. They were looking for something. Money. Deeds. Anything they could sell. I watched the notifications roll in like a play-by-play of their frustration. Tamper alert. Keypad lockout initiated. I could picture it. Gavin in his cheap suit, sweating despite the cold, holding a drill he did not know how to use. Patricia standing behind him, wrapped in a blanket, screaming at him to hurry up. They were rats in a maze I had designed, and they had just hit a dead end. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the woman I had shared a bed with for 35 years. Now she was reduced to a burglar in her own home, breaking into an empty box, hoping to find a scrap of my life to sell. I put the phone face down on the table. Elena looked at me. "Bad news?" she asked. "Just old noise," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing that can reach us here." But the noise was about to get louder. The next afternoon, I was walking along the cliffs with Elena when my phone rang. It was not a notification this time. It was a call from a number I recognized. A Chicago area code. It was Robert, the branch manager at First National Bank. Robert and I went way back. I had designed the reinforcement for his bank's vault 10 years ago. We played golf occasionally. He was one of the few people who knew the true extent of my assets. "Harrison," he said, his voice professional but tight. "I apologize for calling you overseas. I know you are retired." "It is fine, Robert," I said, stepping away from Elena to shield her from the wind. "What is wrong?" "I have a loan application on my desk, Harrison. It is for a home equity line of credit. $500,000. I paused, watching a seagull dive into the ocean. "Against my house." Yes, against the property on Oak Street. The applicant is a Mr. Gavin Vance. He claims to be your legal representative. He has a power of attorney document with your signature on it. I let out a low laugh. A forgery. A clumsy one at that. Gavin was not just a leech, he was a criminal. Harrison Robert continued. The signature looks off, and the title search flagged the property as being held in a trust. I tried to explain this to Mr. Vance, but he became very aggressive. He said you were senile and that he was taking over the estate management. He claims the funds are for urgent structural repairs. Repairs, I said. He means a swimming pool. Listen, Robert. The power of attorney is fake. I never signed anything. I thought so, Robert said. I can call the police right now, Harrison. This is attempted fraud. I can have him arrested in the lobby. He is sitting out there right now drinking our free coffee. I closed my eyes. I imagined Gavin in handcuffs. It would be easy. It would be quick. But it would be too quick. If he was arrested now, Patricia would play the victim. She would say she was tricked. She would cry, and Tyler would bail her out. They would find a way to spin it. No, Robert, I said. Do not arrest him. Not yet. Robert was silent. Harrison, he is trying to steal $500,000 of equity, I know. But I want you to process the application. Process it. Yes. Tell him everything looks good. Tell him the credit check passed. Tell him the funds will be released in 5 days. Make him believe he has won. Let him taste that money. Harrison. Are you sure? I am sure. I want him to commit fully. I want him to spend money he does not have yet. I want him to plan the biggest party of his life. And then when he goes to withdraw the first dollar, I want the account to be frozen. Robert chuckled a dry sound. You are a cold man, Harrison. I learned from the best, Robert. Just keep the file open. Let it hang there like a carrot. I will do it, Robert said. I will tell him to come back on Friday for the final signing. Friday. That was the day of the wedding. Perfect, I said. Thank you, Robert. I hung up. The wind was whipping around me, but I felt calm. I walked back to Elena, who was examining a piece of driftwood. Everything all right? She asked. I took her hand. It was warm and rough from her work. Yes, I said. Just finalizing some old business. The foundation is settling. She did not ask what I meant. She just squeezed my hand and pointed out at the horizon where a storm was brewing far out at sea. It is going to be a rough night, she said. I looked at the dark clouds gathering. Yes, I said, but not for us. For Gavin and Patricia, the storm was already inside the house. They thought they were about to get a $500,000 windfall. They thought they had outsmarted the old engineer. They did not know that by trying to mortgage the house, they had just walked into the final trap. They had given me the one thing I needed to destroy them completely. Proof of intent. Now I just had to wait for the wedding. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the floor was about to drop out from under them. The piece I had built in Portugal was fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a deep lake. I knew it could crack at any moment, but I did not expect the hammer to come from a number I did not recognize. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was preparing a simple dinner of grilled fish and lemon. My phone buzzed on the counter. The screen showed a generic international code. I thought perhaps it was the bank confirming another transfer, or maybe the shipping company bringing the last of my books. I swiped the green icon and held the phone up. The screen filled instantly with a face I knew better than my own, but the expression was one I hardly recognized. It was Tyler. He was wearing sunglasses even though it was clearly overcast in Chicago, and he was grinning like a man who had just won a prize he did not earn. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice distorted slightly by the connection. I bet you are surprised to see me. I borrowed a friend's phone since you decided to be childish and block your own son. But I figured I owed it to you to let you see what real success looks like. I should have hung up. I should have pressed the red button and gone back to my fish. But I stood there frozen by the sheer audacity of his intrusion. Tyler did not wait for me to speak. He flipped the camera around. "Check this out, Dad." He was holding a heavy cardstock envelope. He opened it with a flourish, revealing an invitation that caught the light with a garish yellow shine. "That is 24-karat gold leaf Harrison," he said, using my first name as if we were rivals instead of father and son. Gavin spared no expense. "This isn't just a wedding. It is a coronation. We sent these to the mayor, to the city council, to every major developer in the state." I squinted at the screen. The invitation was tacky. It was the kind of thing a child imagines a rich person would buy. The font was illegible, and the gold was so thick it looked like candy wrapper foil. "You are watching a masterclass in branding, Dad." Tyler continued panning the camera back to his face. "Gavin says you have to spend money to attract money. We are expecting 300 guests. The gifts alone will cover the cost. That is how smart people do business. Not by hoarding pennies in a savings account." I finally found my voice. It was dry and rough. "Tyler, why are you calling me? You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me." "I am calling because I want you to know that we do not need you," Tyler sneered. "I want you to see the venue. I want you to see how much better the house looks now that we have cleared out the gloom." He started walking. The camera shook as he moved through the side gate of the property. "My property. We are setting up the stage right here," he narrated, walking into the backyard. "The band is flying in from New York. Gavin wanted a clear line of sight for the guests, so we had to do some landscaping." He turned the camera toward the center of the yard, and my heart stopped beating for a full second. There was a hole in the sky. For 40 years, a massive white oak tree had stood in the center of that yard. I had planted it the week we moved in. I had planted it with my own hands, digging the soil, mixing the fertilizer, watering it through the droughts of the 90s. I had built a swing on its lower branch for Tyler when he was 5. I had kissed Patricia under its shade on our 25th anniversary. That tree was the anchor of the backyard. Its roots went deep, holding the clay soil together, preventing erosion, protecting the foundation of the house from water damage. Now it was gone. In its place was a raw, jagged stump 3 feet wide, surrounded by a mountain of sawdust and wood chips. The ground around it was churned up by heavy machinery. Tyler pointed the camera at the stump. "Took the crew 2 days to bring this monster down," he said casually. "Gavin said it was blocking the view of the new pool deck. Plus it dropped too many leaves. Messy. We are going to pave over this whole area for the dance floor." I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and hot. They had not just cut down a tree. They had erased history. They had severed the last living connection I had to that land. That tree was a living thing that had sheltered them, and they had butchered it for a dance floor. In the background of the video, I saw a figure in a blue suit pointing at the workers. It was Gavin. He was holding a cigar, gesturing wildly. Faster, he was yelling, his voice faint but audible. "Get that wood chipper running. I want this debris gone by noon. It looks like a lumberyard back here." Tyler laughed. "Look at him. A true leader. He takes action, Dad. He does not agonize over every little branch." I looked at the stump again. I saw the rings of the wood exposed to the gray sky. 40 years of growth. 40 years of survival. Gone in 2 days because a con man wanted a view. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap like the breaking of a branch. It was a quiet click. The safety latch on my restraint had been disengaged. Until this moment, I had been playing a defensive game. I was protecting my assets, waiting for them to fail on their own. I was content to let the house reclaim itself. But this was different. This was violence. This was a deliberate act of destruction, against something innocent. And for the first time I realized that simply withholding money was not enough. Passive resistance was not enough. Gavin Vance needed to be stopped. Not just slowed down. Stopped. "That is a nice stage, Tyler," I said, my voice sounding calm even to my own ears. "It looks expensive." "It is very expensive," Tyler bragged. "But do not worry. Uncle Gavin has it covered." "I am sure he does," I said. "Enjoy the rehearsal, Tyler." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. I pushed my dinner plate aside. I was no longer hungry. I walked out to the balcony and looked at the ocean. I needed to think. I needed to remember. I remembered a name. Years ago, when I was consulting on a structural issue for a warehouse district in downtown Chicago, I had crossed paths with a man named Henderson. Elias Henderson. On paper, he was a private lender, a financier for high-risk construction projects. In reality, he was a loan shark, a sophisticated one, but a shark nonetheless. He did not break legs, he broke lives. He operated with legal contracts that were so tight, they strangled you. If you borrowed money from Henderson, you paid him back, or you lost everything you ever touched. I had done a favor for Henderson once. I had signed off on a building inspection that was borderline allowing him to close a deal. He had told me then, "Harrison, if you ever need a favor, you call me." I admire a man who knows the difference between a crack and a structural failure. I knew Gavin's history. I knew he lived on credit. I knew he borrowed from Peter to pay Paul. And in my research in the nights before I left, I had seen a lien on one of Gavin's shell companies. A lien held by Henderson Holdings, LLC. Gavin owed Henderson money. A lot of money. And knowing Gavin, he was probably dodging the calls. I took my phone out again. I scrolled through my contacts to a number I had not called in 5 years. I hoped it was still active. It rang 4 times. Caldwell. The voice was like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. "Hello, Elias," I said. "It has been a long time." "You are in Portugal," I hear Henderson said. "I thought you retired. I thought you were out of the game." "I am out," I said. "But I see you are still in it. I see you are still holding paper on a man named Gavin Vance." There was a silence on the line. A heavy, dangerous silence. "Vance is a ghost," Henderson said slowly. "He owes me 6 figures. He has been dodging my collectors for 3 months. He says he is broke. He says his assets are frozen." "Why are you asking about Vance, Harrison?" "Because I sat down looking at the darkening sky. He is not broke, Elias. Or at least he is pretending not to be." "He is getting married on Saturday." "Married," Henderson repeated. "Yes. To my ex-wife. And Elias, it is going to be quite a show. Gold-plated invitations, a band from New York, champagne towers. He is spending money like water. Money that I assume belongs to you." I could hear the sound of a chair shifting on the other end. I could almost see Henderson leaning forward, his interest piqued. "Where is this wedding happening?" "At my old house," I said. 420 Oak Street. The ceremony starts at 5. The reception is at 6. Gavin will be there. He will be in a tuxedo. He will be surrounded by wealthy guests. He will be holding court. And he will be very embarrassed if an old creditor shows up, I added. "Embarrassed is not the word I would use," Henderson said, a dark amusement creeping into his tone. "I would use the word liquidated." "He thinks he is untouchable, Elias," I said. "He thinks he has secured a new line of credit. He thinks he has found a new honeypot. He is flashing wealth he does not have." "You are a good friend," Harrison Henderson said. "You always were thorough." "I am not doing this for friendship," I said, looking at the mental image of my severed oak tree. "I am doing it because he cut down my tree. Your tree. He cut down a 40-year-old white oak to build a dance floor. He destroyed something he could never build." There was a pause and then Henderson laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. I understand. A man has to have a code. Do not worry, Harrison. I will attend the wedding. I might even bring a gift. What kind of gift? I asked. A foreclosure notice, Henderson said, and maybe a pair of handcuffs. I have some friends in the fraud division who have been looking for Vance, too. If he is throwing a party, it would be rude not to invite them. Thank you, Elias, I said. Enjoy your retirement, Harrison. The line went dead. I put the phone down. The rage in my chest had settled into a cold, hard resolve. I had just lit the fuse. Gavin wanted a spectacle. He wanted the wedding of the century. He wanted everyone to look at him. Well, I had just ensured that he would get exactly what he wanted. All eyes would be on him, especially the eyes of the men he owed money to. I poured myself a glass of wine. I toasted the empty air. To the oak tree I whispered. The roots were gone, but the timber was about to come crashing down on their heads, and I would have a front row seat to the demolition. Saturday arrived with a gray sky that hung low over Chicago like a dirty wool blanket, but inside the perimeter of my former home everything was designed to sparkle. I sat in my villa in Lagos with my laptop open, connected to the security cameras I had never deactivated. The feed was crisp, high definition. It was 5 o'clock in the evening back in Illinois, and the show was about to begin. I poured myself a glass of water. I did not need alcohol for this. I wanted my senses sharp. I wanted to remember every detail. The garden where my oak tree once stood was now a sea of white tents and rented chairs. Gavin had covered the muddy ground with expensive red carpets, but I could see them sinking into the soft clay with every step the guests took, and what a collection of guests it was. I recognized a few faces from the local business pages, men who had been indicted for fraud, women who ran charities that spent more on galas than on the poor. It was a gathering of vultures pretending to be peacocks. Patricia was standing near the entrance, greeting people. She was wearing a dress that was too young for her, a shimmering silver gown that looked uncomfortable. Around her neck was a diamond necklace that caught the light of the camera. I zoomed in. I recognized that necklace. It was from a high-end rental service in the city. You could borrow it for 48 hours for $2,000. She was literally wearing borrowed time. She looked frantic. Her smile was too wide, her eyes darting around, constantly checking if people were impressed. She was playing the role of the wealthy matriarch, but I knew her tell. She was twisting the ring on her finger. She only did that when she was terrified. Then there was Gavin. He was holding court by the ice sculpture, which was melting faster than he anticipated. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket. He looked like a lounge singer on a cruise ship. I turned up the volume on the microphone hidden near the patio. "We are breaking ground next month on the resort in Tulum," Gavin was saying to a group of men who were clearly only there for the free scotch. "It is going to be massive. Eco-friendly luxury. I have already secured the coastal rights. You gentlemen should get in on the ground floor. Minimum buy-in is $50,000. I shook my head. Tulum. Last week it was a tech startup. The man did not even have a passport. Tyler was standing next to him, nodding like a bobblehead doll. My son looked handsome in his suit. I will give him that, but his posture was weak. He was holding a glass of champagne and laughing too loud at Gavin's jokes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tyler announced, tapping a spoon against his glass, "if I could have your attention, I just want to say how proud I am to stand here today." For years, this house felt like a museum. It was cold. It was quiet. It was run by fear and penny pinching. But look at it now. He gestured to the crowd. This is what a real legacy looks like. Gavin, thank you for showing my mother what true love is. And thank you for showing me what it means to be a man of vision. To the happy couple. The crowd cheered. I watched my son toast to my replacement. I felt a sting of betrayal, but it was duller now. It was like watching a stranger on television. He had made his choice. But as the applause died down, I noticed something that the guests missed. The lights strung up inside the tent flickered. It was subtle, just a quick dimming, but to an engineer, it was a scream for help. I opened a second window on my laptop screen. It was the dashboard for the house's electrical grid. The load meter was in the red zone. You see, when I wired that house, I built it to handle a standard residential load with a 20% safety margin. It was robust, but it was not a power plant. Gavin had brought in commercial stage lighting, massive speakers, industrial heaters for the tent, and a catering kitchen that was running 4 electric ovens simultaneously. He was pulling 300 amps on a 200 amp service. Any competent electrician would have brought in a generator. But generators cost money, and Gavin was cheap where it mattered. He had just plugged everything into the house outlets, probably using $10 power strips. The flickering happened again. This time, it was longer. The music from the band dragged for a second as the voltage dropped. A murmur went through the crowd. Gavin looked up at the chandeliers, annoyed. "Hey," he shouted at a waiter. "Tell the band to check their equipment. We are getting feedback." "It is not the band, Gavin," I whispered to my screen. "It is the physics you ignored." The catering staff brought out the cake. It was a monstrosity 5 tiers high, covered in gold leaf. Patricia clapped her hands like a child. They moved to the center of the dance floor, right over the spot where my oak tree used to be. The spotlights turned on, blasting them with thousands of watts of heat and light. On my dashboard, the temperature warning for the main breaker panel turned from yellow to flashing red. The wires inside the walls were heating up. The insulation was softening. The system was begging for mercy. Gavin picked up the silver knife. He raised it high, grinning for the photographers. And then the house fought back. There was a loud pop that sounded like a gunshot. Instantly, every light in the tent went out. The music died with a groan. The heaters stopped humming. The entire property was plunged into absolute darkness. Screams erupted from the guests. Someone dropped a glass and it shattered. "What is going on?" Patricia shrieked. "Gavin, fix it!" I saw the glow of cell phone flashlights turning on, creating eerie shadows dancing on the tent walls. Gavin was furious. "It is this garbage house," he yelled, and his voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "That cheap old man. Harrison used substandard wiring. I knew it. He never spent a dime on this place. I am going to sue him. I will sue him for every penny he has left." I sat back in my chair in Portugal. Substandard. I had used copper wiring that exceeded code requirements. What I had also installed was a fail-safe, a master surge protector that would cut the power before the house burned down. I had just saved their lives and they were cursing my name. "Wait a minute," I said to myself, watching the screen. The emergency protocol. 5 seconds later, the backup system kicked in. But this was not the main power. This was the emergency lighting I had installed for safety. Low-wattage amber lights mounted near the floor and along the perimeter. The effect was not festive. It was terrifying. The soft amber glow cast long, distorted shadows, making the guests look like ghouls. The silence was heavy. The party atmosphere had evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold reality of a winter night in a dark house. In that dim orange light, a movement at the front gate caught my eye. A car had pulled up. It was not a guest's car. It was a black SUV, heavy and imposing. It blocked the driveway completely, preventing anyone from leaving. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out. The first one was tall, wearing a long wool coat and a fedora. He moved with a slow, deliberate weight. It was Elias Henderson. Flanking him were 2 men who looked like linebackers squeezed into suits. And behind them, flashing blue lights appeared in the distance. A police cruiser. Then another. Henderson did not rush. He walked past the stunned valet drivers. He walked onto the red carpet, his heavy boots sinking into the mud. He walked right into the tent. The guests parted for him instinctively. There is a smell to danger, and Henderson reeked of it. Gavin was still standing by the cake, holding the knife, looking like a fool in the amber light. He squinted, trying to see who had entered. "Who is that?" he demanded, trying to regain control. "This is a private event. You cannot just walk in here." Henderson stopped 10 feet away from the cake. He looked around at the decorations, the frightened guests, the half-eaten food. Then he looked at Gavin. "Hello, Gavin," Henderson said. His voice was deep and scratchy, like a tombstone being dragged across pavement. Gavin's face went pale. Even in the dim light, I could see the blood drain from his cheeks. He dropped the knife. It clattered on the dance floor. "Mr. Henderson," Gavin stammered. "Elias. I did not know you were invited." "I invited myself," Henderson said. "I heard you were throwing a party, a very expensive party, and since you have not answered my calls for 3 months, I assumed your phone was broken. But I see you have plenty of money for cake." Patricia stepped forward, confused and trembling. "Gavin, who is this gentleman? Is he an investor?" Henderson looked at Patricia. He tipped his hat slightly, but his eyes were cold. "I am an investor, you could say that. I invested in your husband's lies, and now I am here to collect my return." Gavin tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. "Elias, please. Not here. Not now. We can talk on Monday. I have a deal closing. The Tulum project." "There is no Tulum project," Gavin Henderson said, stepping closer. "There is no tech startup. There is no money. There is only the $200,000 you owe me, and the fraud charges the gentlemen behind me are interested in." The police officers stepped into the tent. They were uniformed, serious, and they had their hands resting near their belts. "Gavin Vance," one of the officers said, "we have a warrant for your arrest. Wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery of bank documents." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the wind rattling the tent flaps and the distant hum of the police radios. Tyler dropped his champagne glass. It did not break on the carpet. It just rolled away, spilling expensive liquid into the mud. I watched Gavin look for an exit. I watched Patricia realize that the diamond necklace around her neck was about to become evidence. I watched the house I built stand silent and dark, judging them all. "Happy wedding day," I whispered. The cake was uncut. The music was dead. But the real show was just getting started. The amber emergency lights cast long, skeletal shadows across the tent, making everyone look like ghosts attending a funeral rather than a wedding. I watched on my monitor as Gavin Vance tried to summon the last shreds of his bravado. He stepped toward Elias Henderson, puffing out his chest in his white tuxedo, but he looked small against the bulk of the loan shark. "Get out," Gavin shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the exit. "This is a private event. You have no right to be here. Security, get this man off my property." But the hired security guards did not move. They were minimum wage workers who had not been paid yet, and they knew a predator when they saw one. They stepped back, melting into the shadows, leaving Gavin alone in the center of the muddy dance floor. Henderson did not shout. He simply reached out and took the microphone from Gavin's hand. It was a smooth, casual motion, like an adult taking a toy from a tantruming child. He tapped the microphone twice. The sound echoed through the silent tent, booming over the stunned guests. "Your property," Henderson said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. "That is the problem, Gavin. It is not your property." Gavin lunged for the microphone, but one of Henderson's bodyguards stepped forward, blocking him with a wall of muscle. Gavin stumbled back, his expensive shoes slipping in the mud. "You stood in my office 3 months ago," Gavin Henderson continued, addressing the crowd as much as the groom. "You told me you had a prime asset, a historic home in the suburbs. You told me you were going to leverage the equity to pay back the $200,000 you borrowed for your failed condo project in Florida. You signed a promissory note. You put this address on the collateral line." Henderson reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. He held it up to the dim light. "So I called the bank this morning, Gavin. I wanted to verify the lien. And do you know what they told me? They told me the loan was denied. They told me you have zero equity in this house. They told me the title is locked in a trust that you cannot touch." A gasp went through the crowd. I saw the faces of the guests turning from confusion to judgment. They were wealthy people, or at least people who pretended to be wealthy, and the one sin they did not forgive was being broke. "You lied to me," Gavin Henderson said, dropping the paper onto the muddy carpet. "You do not own this house. You do not own the land. You do not even own the suit on your back. You brought me here promising a payoff, and all you have is a stale cake and a room full of people you are trying to hustle." "No, that is not true," Patricia screamed. My ex-wife pushed her way through the crowd. Her face was a mask of panic and denial. She grabbed Gavin's arm, shaking him. "Tell him, Gavin. Tell him about the trust fund transfer. Tell him Harrison signed it over. You are the chairman of Vance Global. You have millions in assets. This man is just confused." Gavin looked at her, and for the first time I saw the mask slip completely. There was no love in his eyes. There was only the feral panic of a trapped animal. "Shut up, Patricia," he hissed. Patricia recoiled as if he had slapped her, but she could not stop. She turned to the police officers standing at the edge of the tent. "Officers, arrest this intruder," she demanded, pointing at Henderson. "He is ruining my wedding. My husband is a respected businessman." The lead police officer stepped forward. He was an older man with a weary face. He did not look at Henderson. He walked straight to Gavin. "Gavin Vance," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "We are not here for Mr. Henderson. We are here for you." Patricia froze. Her hand went to her mouth, covering a silent scream. "We have a warrant for your arrest from the state of Illinois," the officer recited, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. "And another from Wisconsin. And a third from Indiana. The charges include wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and 4 counts of felony forgery." "No," Patricia whispered. "No, that is impossible. He bought me a Porsche." The officer shook his head. "The Porsche was reported stolen by a dealership in Naperville 3 days ago, ma'am. It was taken on a test drive and never returned. We found it parked out front with fake plates." I watched Gavin's knees buckle. The arrogance, the swagger, the vision, it all evaporated, leaving behind a sweating, trembling man in a dirty tuxedo. He held out his hands, and the officer snapped the cuffs on. The metallic click was loud in the silence. They stood him right next to the 5-tier wedding cake. The gold leaf on the frosting shimmered in the emergency lights, a stark contrast to the cold steel on his wrists. It was a perfect tableau of his life. A beautiful, expensive shell with a criminal rot inside. Suddenly, there was a blur of motion. It was Tyler. My son, who had stood frozen until this moment, finally snapped. He could not accept what he was seeing. He could not accept that his hero, his mentor, the man he chose over his own father, was a fraud. "Let him go," Tyler shouted, charging at the police. "This is a mistake. You are making a mistake. He is an investor. He is going to fund my company." "Tyler, stop," I said to the screen, knowing he could not hear me. Tyler grabbed the officer's arm, trying to pull him away from Gavin. It was a foolish, desperate move. One of Henderson's bodyguards, who was standing nearby, did not hesitate. He stepped in and shoved Tyler. It was not a violent punch, just a firm dismissal of a nuisance. Tyler flew back. He hit the table, holding the champagne tower. The crash was spectacular. Hundreds of glasses shattered, sending shards of crystal and cheap sparkling wine flying everywhere. Tyler landed in the mud among the broken glass. He groaned, trying to push himself up, his suit soaked in alcohol and dirt. Gavin did not even look at him. Gavin was looking at the police, trying to negotiate. Wait, listen to me," Gavin stammered, fast and high-pitched. "I can explain. I am a victim here. I did not know the checks were bad. I was given bad information. Mr. Vance, you have the right to remain silent, the officer said, tightening his grip on Gavin's arm. It is her, Gavin shouted suddenly, twisting his body to point a handcuffed finger at Patricia. The crowd went silent again. Patricia stood there trembling, her eyes wide with shock. It is her fault, Gavin yelled, spitting the words out. She put me up to it. She told me her ex-husband was senile. She told me he had millions tucked away and she knew how to get it. I was just trying to help her. She is the one who wanted the lifestyle. Look at her. Look at the dress. Look at the necklace. She forced me to do it. Gavin, what are you saying? Patricia cried out, her voice breaking. I love you. We are getting married. Married? Gavin laughed, a cruel, twisted sound. I would never marry an old hag like you. I was doing you a favor. You are washed up, Patricia. You are boring and you are broke. I was just trying to get the deed to the house so I could flip it and get away from you. I watched Patricia's face crumble. It was not just sadness. It was the total annihilation of her self-worth. For 6 months, she had convinced herself that she was a prize, that she was desirable, that she was upgrading. Now the man she destroyed her family for was standing there in handcuffs, calling her a boring old hag in front of 300 people. She is the mastermind, Gavin screamed as the officers began to drag him toward the exit. She forged the signatures. Check her computer. She is the one you want. You are lying, Patricia wailed, collapsing onto her knees in the mud. Harrison would never treat me like this. Harrison loved me. But I was not there to comfort her. I was thousands of miles away, sitting in the dark, watching the consequences of her choices play out in high definition. The guests began to scatter. They did not say goodbye. They did not offer help. They grabbed their coats and purses, stepping over the broken glass, and the sobbing bride rushing to get to their cars before the police started asking for witness statements. Henderson watched them go. He tipped his hat to the police officer, and then he looked directly at the security camera mounted on the tent pole. He knew I was watching. He gave a small nod, a salute from one professional to another. Then he turned and walked out into the night, leaving the ruin behind him. Tyler was still sitting in the mud, surrounded by broken glass, staring at the spot where Gavin had stood. He looked like a child who had just found out that Santa Claus was not only fake but had stolen his bicycle. Patricia was curled in a ball, her silver dress ruined, weeping into the dirt. The wedding was over. The marriage was dead before it began. And the house, my house, stood silent and dark, its amber lights watching the misery like unblinking eyes. I reached for my mouse. I could have turned off the feed. I could have looked away. But I did not. I watched until the last police car drove away, taking the false king to his cell. Because the hardest part of the demolition was over. The structure had been brought down. Now all that was left was the dust. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking the groom and the illusion of wealth with them. What remained was a silence so heavy, it felt like it could crush the tent poles. The guests had vanished. I have never seen a crowd of social climbers move so fast. They scrambled for their cars, engines revving, tires spinning in the muddy grass, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Within 5 minutes, the driveway was empty. There were no goodbyes, no offers of support, just the smell of exhaust fumes and fear. But the tent was not empty. Elias Henderson was still there, and he was not alone. I watched on my monitor as he clapped his hands once, a sharp sound that echoed in the cold amber light. His 2 bodyguards were joined by a crew of 4 movers who appeared from the black SUV. They did not look like wedding staff. They looked like repossession agents. Load it up, Henderson commanded, pointing at the sound system. All of it. The speakers, the mixing board, the lights. Gavin put it all on the credit account. I watched as they dismantled the stage. They moved with a terrifying efficiency. They were not being careful. Wires were ripped out. Speakers were dragged across the floor. They were stripping the carcass of the party before the body was even cold. One of the men grabbed a stack of gold-painted chairs. "Hey," Tyler shouted from the ground where he was still sitting. "You cannot take those. We need to sit down." Henderson turned to look at my son. He walked over his heavy boots, squelching in the mud. He looked down at Tyler with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You can sit in the dirt, kid," Henderson said. "These chairs are leased. The heaters are leased. The carpet is leased. And since the man who signed the contract is currently being booked for grand larceny, I am mitigating my losses." He signaled to his men. "Take the heaters." "No," Patricia cried out, shivering in her thin dress. "Please, it is freezing. It is 20 degrees out here." Henderson did not even blink. He checked a clipboard. "It is business, ma'am. Inventory is inventory." His men unplugged the industrial heaters. The warmth was sucked out of the tent, instantly replaced by the biting Chicago wind. Patricia wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth chattering. She looked around for something to cover herself with, but her fur coat was in the house and the house was locked down. Henderson walked up to her. He stood close, invading her personal space. He held out his hand, palm up. "The ring," he said. Patricia clutched her left hand to her chest. "What?" "The ring, Patricia. The 3-carat radiant cut diamond on your finger. Gavin leased that too. It was a 48-hour rental for the ceremony. The contract voided the moment he was arrested. Hand it over." Patricia looked at the ring. It was the only thing she had left. It was the symbol of the life she thought she was getting. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "It is mine. He gave it to me." "He gave you a lie," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Do not make my men take it from you, ma'am. That would be undignified." I watched her face. I saw the moment her spirit broke. She realized that even the token of love on her finger was just another piece of borrowed scenery. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she slid the ring off. She dropped it into Henderson's palm. He held it up to the emergency light, checking for scratches, then dropped it into his pocket like it was a loose coin. "Thank you," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "My crew will be done in 10 minutes. I suggest you vacate the premises before we take the tent down too." He turned and walked away, directing his men to start rolling up the red carpet. Patricia stood there in the mud, her hand feeling phantom light without the ring. She looked at the house, then she looked at Tyler. Tyler was struggling to his feet. He was covered in mud and champagne. His suit was ruined. He wiped his face with a dirty sleeve and looked at his mother. I expected him to hug her. I expected them to cling to each other in the wreckage. But I forgot that I had raised a boy who never learned to take responsibility. "This is your fault," Tyler spat out. Patricia blinked, confused. "What did you say?" "I said this is your fault," Tyler screamed, his voice cracking. "You told me he was legitimate. You told me he was a genius. I quit my job, Mom. I quit the firm. I told my boss to go to hell because I was going to be a CEO." "Tyler, please," Patricia sobbed, reaching out to him. "Do not touch me," Tyler recoiled. "You and your obsession with money. You just had to have the Porsche. You just had to have the pool. You drove Dad away. You called him a loser. But Dad never got arrested at his own wedding." Patricia flinched as if he had slapped her. "Tyler, how can you say that? I did this for us. I wanted you to have capital for your business." "You did this for you," Tyler yelled, kicking the side of the wedding cake. The 5-tier monstrosity wobbled and collapsed, crashing into the mud in a heap of fondant and gold leaf. "Look at this," Tyler gestured to the ruin. "I am 28 years old, and I am ruined. I am an accomplice to fraud. My name is on the incorporation papers for the shell company. They are going to come after me. I could go to jail. Because of you." He was pacing now, frantic like a caged animal. Dad tried to warn me. He tried to tell me at the coffee shop. But I listened to you. I trusted you. You are supposed to be the adult. You are just a gold digger who got dug. Stop it, Patricia screamed, putting her hands over her ears. Stop it, Tyler. I lost everything too. I lost my husband. I lost my home. I have nowhere to go. Good, Tyler said, his eyes cold and hard. I hope you freeze out here. I am leaving. He turned and started walking toward the driveway. Where are you going? Patricia cried out, running after him, stumbling in her heels. Tyler, do not leave me here. I am going to my friend's house, Tyler shouted back, not stopping. I am going to see if I can crash on a couch. Do not follow me, and do not call me until you fix this. He walked into the darkness, disappearing past the gate where the Bentley used to be, leaving his mother alone in the freezing wind. Patricia stood in the center of the demolished wedding. The movers were taking the last of the chairs. The tent was flapping loudly in the wind. The amber emergency lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like bars of a cell. She turned to look at the house. For the first time in 30 years, the house looked hostile to her. The windows were dark like dead eyes. The front door was locked. The smart system I had installed was silent, refusing to recognize her presence. She wrapped her arms around her chest, shaking violently from the cold. She looked at the spot where the oak tree used to be. There was just a hole now, a muddy scar in the earth. She realized then that she was exactly like that hole. Empty. Rootless. She had cut down the only thing that protected her, and now the storm was here. She had no husband. She had no lover. She had no son. She had no home. She had nothing but a ruined dress and a fake tan that was streaking in the cold air. She needed a savior. She needed someone who knew how to fix broken things. She reached into her small clutch purse. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the phone twice into the mud before she could grip it. She wiped the screen on her dress. She knew she was blocked. She knew I had walked away. But desperation has a way of making people believe in miracles. She dialed the number she had known by heart for 40 years. The number she used to call when the car broke down, when the pipe burst, when she just needed to hear a steady voice. I sat in my villa in Portugal watching the screen. I saw her lift the phone to her ear. I saw her squeeze her eyes shut, praying. And then on the glass table next to my wine glass, my phone began to buzz. It was the middle of the night in Chicago, but the sun was setting in Algarve. The light was beautiful, golden, and warm. I looked at the phone. It vibrated, dancing slightly on the glass surface. I knew exactly what she was going to say. I knew exactly what tone she would use. The frantic victim. The damsel in distress. I picked up the phone. I did not say hello. I just swiped the green button and held it to my ear, waiting. Harrison, save us. Her scream was raw, tearing through the connection. Harrison, are you there? You have to help us. Gavin is being arrested. They are taking everything. He is not who we thought he was. Tyler is on the floor. He passed out. Harrison, please tell them you still own the house. Tell them they cannot kick us out. I took a slow sip of my wine. The taste was oaky and rich. I looked out at the ocean, watching a fishing boat bobbing on the waves. The loop was closed. The timeline had caught up to itself. I listened to her beg. I listened to her try to manipulate me one last time, using Tyler's name, using the house, using our history. But I was not listening to a wife anymore. I was listening to a stranger who had broken into a building that was scheduled for demolition. Patricia. I said, my voice steady and low. Do you remember what I told you 6 months ago about the foundation? I told you that you cannot build a future on a sinkhole. Harrison, this is not the time for your engineering lectures. We are being ruined. I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the table. The silence returned to my villa. But this time it was different. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a job completed. The final inspection was done. The structure had failed exactly as predicted. Now came the cleanup. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to hold the broom. I put the phone back to my ear, but I did not speak immediately. I let the sound of Patricia's erratic breathing fill the silence. She was crying the kind of ugly, gasping sobs of someone who has just realized they are standing on a trapdoor that has already opened. "Harrison, please say something," she begged. They took Tyler's phone. "He is walking the streets somewhere. You have to call the lawyer. You have to wire bail money. He is your son." My voice when I finally spoke was not angry. It was not loud. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a client that their building was condemned. "Patricia," I said, calm and measured. "You are asking me to invest in a failed project. You are asking me to pour concrete into a bottomless pit. He is not a project, Harrison. He is our boy," Patricia screamed. "He was tricked. Gavin made him sign those papers. He did not know he was laundering money. He thought he was being an executive." "Ignorance is not a defense," I said. "Tyler is 28 years old. He has a degree. He had a job. He chose to walk away from it because he wanted a shortcut. He wanted the glory without the work. But he is scared, Harrison. He is just a kid. He is a man, Patricia. A man who looked me in the eye and told me I was small. A man who told me my money was not good enough for his vision. Well, now he has a chance to see his vision through. He wanted to be a partner. Partners share liability." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the wind whipping around the tent back in Chicago. "So you are just going to leave him," she whispered. "You are going to let him go to jail." "I am going to let him learn," I said. I bailed him out of the drop-shipping business. I bailed him out of the crypto scheme. I bailed him out of the restaurant idea. Every time I fixed it, he learned nothing except that Daddy would always write a check. Not this time. "You are a monster," she hissed. "No, Patricia, I am a retiree, and my pension does not cover bail for wire fraud." I took a sip of my wine. The sun was gone now, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple. "And there is one more thing," I continued. "We need to discuss the house." "The house," she stammered. "What about the house?" I opened the document on my laptop. It was the foreclosure notice drafted automatically by the trust's legal software. The trust agreement was very specific, Patricia. It stated that the property must be maintained in good standing. It stated that no criminal activity could be conducted on the premises. And most importantly, it stated that no unauthorized structural modifications could be made without the trustee's approval. So she asked, her voice trembling. So I said, looking at the feed of the ruined backyard, "You cut down a 100-year-old oak tree. You dug up the drainage field. You overloaded the electrical grid to the point of failure. And you hosted a felon who used the address for identity theft. Harrison, please. You have violated every single clause of the occupancy agreement. The trust has automatically triggered a default. The property is no longer yours to live in. It is a distressed asset." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, my attorneys will be there with the sheriff. They are not coming to help you move back in. They are coming to change the locks. The house is being seized by the trust to be sold at auction to cover the damages you caused." "Sold," she screamed. "But where will I go? I have no money. I gave it all to the wedding planner. Gavin took the rest." "That sounds like a cash flow problem," I said. "Maybe you should ask Gavin for a refund." "Oh wait, he is in holding. Harrison, you cannot do this. We were married for 35 years. And for 35 years I kept a roof over your head," I said, my voice finally hardening. "I kept the water running. I kept the heat on. And you called it boring. You called it a prison. Well, Patricia, I am setting you free. You wanted excitement. You wanted a new life. You have it. Harrison, please. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings, I said, cutting her off. Anything left after that will be considered abandoned property and donated to charity, including the wedding dress. I am begging you. Goodbye, Patricia. I hung up. I did not slam the phone down. I placed it gently on the table. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was relief. The heavy lifting was done. The demolition was complete. I looked out at the dark ocean. Somewhere out there, a ship was sailing freely unburdened by the anchor it had dragged for too long. I poured the last of the wine into my glass. Tomorrow the lawyers would handle the debris. Tomorrow the cleanup crew would come. But tonight, I was just a man enjoying the silence. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. The next morning, Chicago was hit by a storm that seemed personal. The wind howled, tearing at the branches of the trees, and snow fell in heavy, wet clumps. At 8 o'clock precisely, a black sedan pulled up to the curb of 420 Oak Street, followed closely by a sheriff's department cruiser. My attorney stepped out of the car. His name was Marcus Stone. He was not a man who smiled often, and today he looked like an executioner in a cashmere coat. He carried a leather portfolio that contained the final eviction order, the foreclosure papers, and the authorization to change the locks. Inside the house, Patricia and Tyler were likely huddled in the living room, the only room where the residual heat from the fireplace lingered. The smart heating system had shut down completely at midnight following my remote command. The temperature inside was dropping rapidly, matching the freezing air outside. I watched on the security feed as Marcus walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. He did not ring it timidly. He held his finger on the button, a long, insistent summons that announced the end of an era. The door opened. Patricia stood there, wrapped in a duvet, her hair messy, her eyes red and swollen. She looked 20 years older than she had just yesterday. Behind her, Tyler was sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands, still wearing the mud-stained pants from the wedding. Mrs. Caldwell, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the wind. I am Marcus Stone, representing the Caldwell Family Trust. By the authority of the trustee, and pursuant to the violation of the occupancy agreement, you are hereby served with an immediate eviction notice. Patricia stared at him, blinking, as if he were speaking a foreign language. Eviction, she whispered. But we have nowhere to go. It is snowing. That is not the trust's concern, Marcus replied, handing her the paperwork. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises. The sheriff is here to ensure the transition is orderly. Any personal property left behind after that time will be cataloged and placed in storage at your expense or disposed of. Tyler stood up slowly. He walked to the door, pushing past his mother. You cannot do this, he said, his voice hoarse. My father would not let this happen. Your father is the one who authorized it, Marcus said, looking at Tyler with cold indifference. In fact, he insisted on the 30-minute timeline. He wanted to make sure the locksmiths could secure the property before the storm got worse. Tyler flinched. The reality of my rejection hit him harder than any physical blow. He realized that the safety net he had always taken for granted, the one he had mocked and spat on, was truly gone. You have 29 minutes, Marcus said, checking his watch. The next half hour was a frantic, humiliating scramble. I watched them running through the house, grabbing what they could. They did not take the expensive appliances or the art. They took blankets, coats, and boots. They stuffed clothes into garbage bags because they had no suitcases left. Tyler tried to take his gaming computer, but the sheriff stopped him. Electronics stay, the officer said, unless you have a receipt proving personal ownership independent of the household funds. Tyler dropped the computer on the floor. He looked at it, the tool of his escapism, his window into a world where he was a hero, and he walked away, leaving it behind. At 8:30 sharp, Marcus stood by the door, holding it open. Time is up. Patricia walked out first. She was carrying 2 plastic bags filled with clothes. She wore her fur coat, but it looked tattered in the harsh morning light. She stepped onto the porch, slipping slightly on the ice. She looked back at the warm hallway, the foyer where we had welcomed guests for 3 decades. "Move along, Mom," the sheriff said gently but firmly. Tyler followed her. He had a backpack and a duffel bag. He did not look back. He kept his head down, shielding his face from the wind and from the shame. Marcus closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was final. It was the sound of a book closing. The locksmith stepped forward immediately, his drill whining as he began to bore into the deadbolt. He was removing the old lock, the one whose key Patricia had carried for 35 years, and replacing it with something new, something she could never open. They stood on the sidewalk, shivering, as the sheriff placed a bright orange sticker on the front door. "Seized property. Do not enter." The snow was falling harder now, covering the muddy scars of the wedding, covering the stump of the oak tree, covering the tracks of the Bentley that had taken Gavin away. Tyler pulled his phone out of his pocket. It was his last lifeline. He dialed a number. I saw the call come through on my screen in Portugal. I did not answer. I did not even look at it. I just let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I logged into the carrier's website and clicked Cancel Service. On the sidewalk, Tyler stared at his phone. The signal bars disappeared, replaced by a no-service message. He tapped the screen, frantically rebooting the phone, but the result was the same. He looked up at the gray sky and let out a scream of frustration. It was a raw, primal sound, but the wind swallowed it instantly. He turned to his mother. "You did this," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You and your greed." Patricia did not answer. She was staring at the house. "I am leaving," Tyler said, shouldering his bag. "I am going to the shelter downtown. I heard they have beds." "The shelter," Patricia whispered, horrified. "Tyler, no. We can go to a hotel." "With what money, Mom?" Tyler snapped. "Your credit cards are maxed. Dad cut us off. Gavin stole everything else. We are homeless. Do you understand that? We are homeless people." He started walking down the street, his figure becoming smaller and smaller in the swirling snow. He walked with a limp, his expensive shoes ruined by the weather. He looked like a refugee from a war he had started. Patricia watched him go. She took a step to follow him, but then stopped. She knew he did not want her. She knew she was the anchor that had dragged him down. She turned back to the gate. She gripped the cold iron bars, looking through them at the yard. Her eyes fell on the stump of the white oak tree. The snow was piling up on the flat surface of the cut wood like a white shroud. She remembered the day I planted it. It was a Saturday in spring. We were young then. We had just bought the house. I was wearing my work boots covered in dirt, and she had brought me a glass of lemonade. "Harrison," she had said, laughing, "why are you planting such a small stick? It looks pathetic." "It is an investment, Patricia," I had told her, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Oaks grow slow, but they grow strong. This tree will be here long after we are gone. It will shade our grandchildren." She remembered how I had cared for that tree, how I had pruned it, fed it, protected it from beetles. It was my pride. It was the symbol of my stability. And she had let Gavin cut it down. She had stood there sipping champagne while the chainsaws roared. She had laughed when Gavin said it was blocking the view. She had thought she was clearing the way for a brighter future. But now she saw the truth. The tree was not blocking the view. It was the view. It was the shelter. It was the strength. Gavin had promised her a pool, a resort, a paradise. But all he had given her was a hole in the ground and a stump. She looked at the house again. The windows were dark. The curtains were drawn. It looked impenetrable. It was a fortress I had built to keep the cold out, but now she was on the outside. She realized then that Gavin never loved her. He loved the access she provided. He loved the naive vanity that made her an easy mark. He saw a woman who was bored and ungrateful, and he exploited every crack in her character. But Harrison had loved her. I had loved her not with grand gestures or stolen Porsches, but with the quiet, steady love of maintenance. I fixed the leaks. I paid the bills. I secured the future. I insulated the walls so she would never feel a draft. I anticipated problems before they happened. I was the oak tree, boring, sturdy, reliable. And she had taken an axe to me. She sank to her knees in the snow. The cold seeped through her thin pants, biting into her skin. She dropped her bags. "Harrison," she sobbed, her voice weak. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." She reached through the bars, trying to touch the air of the yard, trying to reclaim a piece of the life she had thrown away. But the iron was cold and unforgiving. A car drove by, splashing slush onto her coat. The driver did not stop. To the world, she was just another tragic figure on a winter street, a woman who had gambled everything and lost. She stayed there for a long time, crying until her tears froze on her cheeks. She cried for the house. She cried for Tyler. But mostly, she cried for the realization that she had held a diamond in her hand for 35 years and traded it for a piece of glass because the glass sparkled more. Eventually, the cold became too much. She stood up, her legs stiff and numb. She picked up her plastic bags. She looked at the house one last time. "Goodbye, Harrison," she whispered. She turned and began to walk in the opposite direction of Tyler. She walked toward the bus stop, her head bowed against the wind. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could never come back. The snow continued to fall, burying the footprints she left behind, burying the stump, burying the memory of the wedding that never was. And in Portugal, the sun was shining. I closed my laptop. The feed went dark. The house was empty. The parasites were gone. The structure was damaged, but the foundation held. It was time to rebuild. Not the house, but the rest of my life. I walked out to the garden where Elena was waiting. She was planting herbs in a terracotta pot. Her hands were dirty with soil. "What are you planting?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "Rosemary," she said, smiling. "For remembrance. And mint. For fresh starts." I picked up a trowel. "Let me help you," I said. "I know a thing or two about roots." We worked together in the warm sun, digging into the earth. It felt good. It felt real. The storm in Chicago was a world away. The woman crying at the gate was a ghost. The son walking to a shelter was a stranger. I was Harrison. I was 72 years old. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Building something new, one scoop of dirt at a time. The gavel came down in the courtroom 6 months later. But I did not need to be there to hear the thud. The sound of justice being served travels across oceans, if you know how to listen. Gavin Vance, or whatever his real name was, did not look like a visionary anymore. In the courtroom sketches I saw online, he looked like a deflated balloon. The state prosecutors did not go easy on him. They layered the charges like bricks in a wall. Wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. And thanks to Elias Henderson's testimony, a few counts of interstate racketeering. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 10. His assets, which turned out to be nothing more than leased cars and maxed-out credit cards, were seized. He went into the system owing money to everyone from the IRS to the catering company that baked his wedding cake. Tyler fared better on paper, but worse in reality. Because he had no prior record and because his lawyer argued he was manipulated by a predator, he avoided jail time. But the sentence he got was a different kind of prison. 5 years of probation, 2,000 hours of community service, and a restitution order for $50,000, payable to the victims of the shell company he had foolishly put his name on. But the real punishment was not the money. It was the stain. In the world of finance and startups, a felony fraud conviction is a death sentence. No bank would ever lend to him. No reputable firm would ever hire him. My son, the boy who wanted to be a CEO at 28, was now working the night shift at a warehouse loading boxes onto trucks. The irony was not lost on me. He was doing the exact same manual labor he had once looked down on, except he was doing it with a criminal record and a mountain of debt. And Patricia. Patricia did not go to jail. She was not charged with a crime. Her punishment was simply living the life she had created. She moved into a small, subsidized apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was a basement unit with thin walls and a view of a dumpster. She got a job as a cashier at a discount grocery store. At 60 years old, instead of planning garden parties or driving a Porsche, she was standing on her feet for 8 hours a day, scanning coupons for people who looked at her with the same indifference she used to show me. I heard from a mutual friend that she still wears her wedding ring. Not the one from Gavin, obviously, but the simple gold band I gave her 35 years ago. She dug it out of a jewelry box she had saved. Maybe she wears it to keep men away. Or maybe she wears it to remind herself that once upon a time she had everything she needed and she threw it away for a shiny lie. But I do not spend much time thinking about them. The past is a closed file. Here in Algarve, the spring has arrived. The almond trees are in bloom, covering the hills in clouds of white and pink. I stood on the construction site of the new school. It was a project I had dreamed of for years, but never had the courage to start. It was a technical school for underprivileged youth, teaching them the trades that built the world. Carpentry, welding, and of course structural engineering. The money from the sale of the house in Chicago had paid for the land and the materials. The trust had liquidated the asset as promised, and after paying off the liens and the legal fees, the remainder was substantial. I could have bought a yacht. I could have bought a bigger villa. But I remembered the oak tree. I remembered how good it felt to plant something that would outlast me. Elena walked up to me, handing me a hard hat. She looked beautiful in the sunlight, her silver hair shining. The foundation is set. Harrison, she said, pointing to the fresh concrete. It is curing perfectly. I looked at the slab. It was thick, reinforced with rebar, smooth and level. It was strong enough to hold up a library, a workshop, a future. It looks good, I said. It looks permanent. We walked away from the site, hand in hand, down the path toward the ocean. The air smelled of salt and wild thyme. Do you ever miss it? Elena asked quietly. The life you had before. I stopped and looked at the water. I thought about the cold Chicago winters. I thought about the silent dinners. I thought about the constant feeling of being undervalued, of being a wallet instead of a human being. No, I said honestly. I miss the man I thought I was raising. I miss the woman I thought I married. But those people did not exist. They were characters in a story I was telling myself. The reality was different. Elena squeezed my hand. Well, the reality here is pretty good. Yes, I said. It is. We sat on a bench overlooking the cliffs. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. It was the kind of sunset that makes you grateful just to be breathing. People often talk about revenge. They say it is sweet. They say it is a dish best served cold. They make movies about it, where the hero destroys his enemies with fire and fury. But sitting there watching the waves, I realized that revenge is exhausting. It requires energy. It requires hate. And at 72, I do not have time for hate. I did not destroy Gavin Vance. His own greed destroyed him. I did not ruin Tyler's life. His own arrogance did that. I did not break Patricia's heart. She broke it herself when she tried to fill it with things instead of love. All I did was remove the scaffolding. I stopped propping them up. I stopped fixing their mistakes. I stopped being the safety net for people who were trying to cut the ropes. That is the structural law of life. If you build your house on sand, if you cut corners, if you cheat the physics of integrity, gravity will eventually do the rest. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air. I felt light. I felt unburdened. I looked at Elena. She was sketching in a small notebook, capturing the line of the horizon. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "A new beginning," she said, smiling. I smiled back. My phone was in my pocket, turned off. I did not need it. There were no emergencies to handle, no alarms to answer. No one was calling to ask for money, or bail, or a second chance. The only thing I had to do was watch the sun go down and wake up tomorrow to build a school. The ribbon cutting for the Caldwell Technical Institute was not a black tie affair. There were no ice sculptures. There was no champagne tower. There were no rented tuxedos or leased Ferraris parked out front. Instead, there was dust. There was the smell of sawdust and fresh paint. There were tables filled with heavy tools, welding masks, and blueprints. And there were 50 young men and women from the local villages, eyes wide with a hunger for opportunity that I recognized from my own youth. They were not looking for a handout. They were looking for a trade. I stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. Elena was in the front row, beaming. The mayor of Lagos was there, not because I paid him, but because this school was going to change the local economy. I cut the red ribbon with a pair of industrial shears. The applause was loud and genuine. It felt different than the applause at Gavin's wedding. That applause had been bought. This applause was earned. Later that evening, as the sun began its descent over the Atlantic, turning the water into a sheet of hammered copper, I sat in my study. On my desk sat a single envelope. It had arrived 3 days ago, forwarded by my lawyer, Marcus Stone. It had a Chicago postmark. The handwriting was messy, frantic. It was from Tyler. For 3 days I had let it sit there unopened. I treated it like a suspicious structural crack, monitoring it from a distance. But tonight, after seeing the hope in the eyes of my students, I decided to open it. I slit the envelope with a letter opener. There was no money request. My lawyer had made it clear that any request for funds would result in an immediate restraining order. It was a letter written on lined notebook paper. Dad. It began. I am writing this on my break at the warehouse. My back is killing me. I lifted 400 boxes today. My hands are blistered. I look at them, and for the first time I remember your hands. I remember how rough they were when you came home from work when I was a kid. I used to think they were ugly. Now I know they were just tired. I took a sip of my wine. The vintage was excellent. I live in a studio apartment with 2 other guys. The letter continued. It smells like ramen and old socks. I hate it, but I pay my share of the rent every Friday. I haven't missed a payment. It is the hardest money I have ever earned. Mom calls me sometimes. She cries about the basement apartment. She cries about her feet hurting from standing at the register. She still talks about the house like it was stolen from us, but I stopped listening. Nobody stole it, Dad. We threw it away. I felt a twinge in my chest. Not regret. Just the dull ache of a scar that has healed but remembers the wound. I am not asking for anything, Tyler wrote. I know I lost that right. I just wanted you to know that I finally get it. I get what you meant about the foundation. I am trying to pour a new one. It is slow. It is hard. And I am alone. But I am doing it. I hope you are happy wherever you are. You were the only real thing in that house. It was signed simply Tyler. I folded the letter. I did not cry. I did not reach for the phone. There is a term in engineering called plastic deformation. It is when a material is stretched beyond its elastic limit. It changes shape permanently. It does not snap back to its original form. My relationship with my son had undergone plastic deformation. He was finally learning to be a man, but he had to do it without me. If I stepped in now, if I sent money or advice, I would just be the crutch again. I would weaken his new concrete before it had time to cure. I placed the letter in my desk drawer. I would keep it, but I would not answer it. Elena walked into the room carrying a bowl of olives and cheese. She saw the open letter and the look on my face. "Everything okay?" she asked. I looked at her. I looked at the blueprints of the school expansion spread out on my desk. I looked at the view of the ocean that I had paid for with the wreckage of my past. "Everything is structural sound," I said. We walked out to the balcony. The air was filled with the scent of salt and the rosemary we had planted. Somewhere in Chicago, Patricia was likely scanning coupons, her feet aching, dreaming of a life she was too shallow to keep. Somewhere in a warehouse, Tyler was lifting a box, finally understanding the weight of $1. Somewhere in a prison cell, Gavin was staring at a concrete wall, knowing he couldn't charm his way through it. And here in Portugal, I was holding the hand of a woman who loved me for my mind, not my bank account. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean Atlantic air. They say you can't choose your family. That is a lie. You can choose. You choose who you let in. You choose who you support. And most importantly, you choose when to close the door. I raised my glass to the setting sun. "Here is to strong foundations," I whispered. And for the first time in 72 years, I didn't worry about the roof caving in. The house I built was solid, and I was finally home. I am Harrison Caldwell. I am a builder. I am a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I am free. If you are listening to this and you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders because you are carrying people who would not carry you, remember this. It is okay to put them down. It is okay to walk away. It is okay to let the house fall if the foundation is rotten, because sometimes you have to clear the rubble before you can plant a new tree. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you find your own Algarve. I hope you find your own peace. And most of all, I hope you find the courage to inspect your own foundation before, it is too late. Goodbye from Portugal, and good luck.